It struck me as such a well-written opening statement because it's like discovering this horrible mystery story. What happened to him? Here's a good diplomat who's come back to serve his country as head of mission in Kiev, and he finds out there's other thing going on with Giuliani and the rest of them. We're going to put together this kind of drug deal where they say, okay, if you want the military aid to fight off the Russians, give us the dirt on Biden.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Chris, for your question. First of all, Ambassador Taylor served our country honorably. He's a graduate of West Point. He served in Vietnam with the 101st Airborne. He served in both Democratic and Republican administrations. And his opening statement, which is now in the public domain, is devastating to Donald Trump. It shows, in fact, that there were two quid pro quos, that Ukraine had not only to have to go and investigate the Bidens, they also had to go ahead and make it public, which ostensibly is so that the Trump campaign could then use that publicly. And they also had to investigate the DNC and that crazy conspiracy theory for the 2016 elections. It was very damning for the president.
Well, you make a great point there, which is President Trump wanted to be able to say, and Biden's under investigation in Ukraine.
Absolutely. That's why it was so important that the Ukrainian leader not only do these two investigations, but also make it public. And it's right there in the opening statement of Ambassador Taylor.
Senator, what I liked about his testimony, it was his lively description of the situation. Here's a country, Ukraine, whatever you think of it, it's the front line with the Russians. And the Russians are trying to rebuild their empire. And they want to use Ukraine as part of the rebuilding, of course, make it part of themselves again. And here they are facing Russian tank fire. And all they want is some Javelin missiles to defend themselves with, to fight the tanks. And at that very moment, the president of the United States sends word, you don't get any help right now, no matter how much trouble you're in holding your country against the Russians, unless you get me some dirt on my political enemies. It's so vivid.
Yeah, if you think about the fact that Russia was trying to kill Ukrainians during this period of time, and that this was about protecting them. And here's the deal, Chris. You know, we can quit talking about the whistleblower and who it is. The whistleblower is now irrelevant. We now have a conversation that has been summarized. We now have Sondland. We have Taylor. We have Giuliani. We have Mulvaney, all saying there was a quid pro quo. I mean, this was, in fact, a shakedown of a foreign government for the president's political purposes. That is against the law. And I hope that people don't get distracted by all the Republicans arguing about the process. When you don't have the facts, you talk about the process. And it is the fact that he recorded all these notes. Those are recorded recollections. They can be admissible in court. I think today was a very bad day for all the Republicans saying, oh, look at the process. They're going to have to come to grips with the reality of the facts that are in front of them.
You know, Josh, I wonder about the reporting because everybody likes to layer this and layer this and layer this with more process. But bottom line, have we ever in history found a president who basically admits what he did? He's not denying the transcripts. He's bragging about it again with Sean Hannity last night. We got a perfect transcript out there. And then he doesn't really deny that he did what he did, except he doesn't like the term quid pro quo. But it's so clearly what he's done. And now this guy has testified with vivid testimony that this is exactly what happened.
Right. What's becoming clearer and clearer, Chris, is that the president seems to believe that it's fine to have a trade A for B pretty explicitly. He just thinks as long as you don't use the phrase quid pro quo, that's fine. Now, unfortunately, for the president, that's not going to be a legal argument, probably one that's not going to be compelling to House Democrats. The real question is that going to be an argument that would be compelling to Republicans if they have to face an impeachment trial?
Well, let's try. They don't have to put the word quid pro quo into the Article 1. All they have to do is the guy said today, Bill Taylor, the ambassador, he said, there's a direct line.
In fact, Bill Taylor
direct line between what Trump wanted, the dirty one, and what he was holding up.
And Bill Taylor himself uses the phrase quid pro quo in his statement today to Congress. Yeah, that we obtained here at NBC News. He says this is a rancorous story about whistleblowers, Mr. Giuliani, side channels, quid pro quos, corruption, and interference in elections. So even if the president doesn't think that's what happened, his own ambassador who was working on this issue described it in that specific term.
Let's get back to the impeachment anyway. Before that, Bill Taylor echoed the accounts of a shadow foreign policy, describing a parallel channel of U.S. policymaking that he called highly irregular because it operated on mostly outside the official State Department channels. And it included, of course, Rudy Giuliani. Taylor says that according to National Security Council aide Tim Morrison, while Trump denied the quid pro quo to Sondland, he did insist that President Zelensky go to a microphone and say he's opening investigations of Biden and the 2016 election interference. Of course, that's all made up, the last part. Likewise, Taylor testified that Sondland said, quote, that President Trump was adamant that President Zelensky himself had to clear things up and do it in public. Otherwise, Sondland told the Ukrainians that we would be at a stalemate. Back to you, Claire, and I just think this question is pretty, this shakedown. The President of the United States takes a country that's desperate to survive, desperate for Javelin missiles, in fact, they used to fight tanks. Russian tanks are advancing toward them. They've already taken Crimea from them. They hope to take away the whole country eventually, starting in the east. And at that very moment of crisis, when they desperately need this crucial military aid, the president says, okay, give me some dirt or you ain't getting nothing. It's so horrible.
It is unimaginable that a president of the United States would sacrifice the national security of this country because now our reputation is sullied permanently, that he would play political games with foreign aid for one of our allies. And this wasn't shadow foreign policy. This was shadow political operatives. This was no different than what they were trying to do at Watergate. This was about trying to win elections, not about trying to implement a foreign policy. And, you know, if you think about the chants during the 2016 election about Hillary Clinton and what she actually did, it may be time for us to start saying lock him up about Rudy Giuliani.
Yeah, I was thinking to say, Claire, you're right, Senator. It's like the plumbers. It's the plumbers in Watergate. It's the shadow government, the separate bunch of henchmen. Anyway, the White House responded to the news from Taylor's deposition in a statement late today. Quote, President Trump has done nothing wrong. This is a coordinated smear campaign from far-left lawmakers and radical unelected bureaucrats waging war on the Constitution. There is no quid pro quo. Congressman, I've been reading with a little bit of dismay that you might hold up these hearings, the impeachment process till after Thanksgiving. Is waiting to embellish the record at some point a mistake?
That's a good question, Chris. We have to follow the facts where it will lead us. The evidence that's come out is already incredibly damning against the President of the United States. I do want to add in a human element to this. In the opening statement, Ambassador Taylor talks about 13,000 Ukrainians having died in this war with Russia, and that more undoubtedly would die because of their holding of U.S. security assistance. So what Donald Trump did actually resulted in loss of lives. And it's also harming U.S. national security. I serve an active duty in the military, and one of the central tenets of U.S. national security is pushing back against Russian aggression. Ukraine's at the tip of the spear, and when we hold back assistance to Ukraine, we're harming our own national security.
Well said. A new CNN poll out today, by the way, Congressman, shows that 50%, half the American people favored not only impeaching Trump, but removing him from office. That's half now. That's consistent with recent polls from Gallup and Fox News, which also show a majority of Americans, 52% and 51% in those cases, respectively, supporting the president's removal. I want to go back to you, Congressman, because you're right there. Do you think we have enough? Because what I'm concerned is this is like that story of World War II, a bridge too far. If you take too long, if the train slows down and this thing goes into next year, it seems to me politically unsavory to have to impeach and try a president in the middle of the Iowa caucuses. That's my thought.
Chris, when the White House released the summarized call transcript, that was like the Watergate tapes. It established that Donald Trump, right after the Ukrainian leader asked for military assistance, he asked for a favor, and those two favors are investigate the Bidens, investigate the Democratic National Committee. All these witnesses essentially corroborate that narrative, which is undisputed, and it is illegal to solicit a foreign power to interfere in our elections. It's even worse when you condition military aid and a meeting with the president on it. No one is above the law.
Can we get it done by Thanksgiving, the House part?
It's again going to depend on the witnesses and the facts that are coming in. But I do think that we're going to expedite this. We're going to start having depositions on weekends, having 2 depositions a day. So we're very aware of the time element.
Let me go to the center on this. Senator McCaskill, Mitch McConnell is a wily character. Without going any further, he's a character. It's without. I don't go into personal attacks like that.
That's one way of calling him.
I'm just trying to call him what he is. And this guy is going to try to hold his majority. The worst way he has to hold 3 or 4 seats, he can do it. It's all doable. The whole thing's up in the air now. And my question is, do you think he wants to let this thing get over with before New Year's, or does he want to drag it into next year during the Democratic fight for the nomination?
No, I think he wants it over with. I mean, I think people forget this door swings both ways. He's got senators that are in his caucus that are in political trouble. You look at Joni Ernst in Iowa, where Trump is upside down now, and her numbers have really slipped. You look at people like Thom Tillis, who has the worst numbers in the country right now, maybe as bad as Mitch McConnell's even. You look at somebody like the senator from Arizona, who was appointed into John McCain's job in a state that's trending our direction. Those people have very tough votes. He wants to get this out of the way. This impeachment vote will be tough. If it is a partisan vote in the House, Mitch McConnell will try to make it a partisan vote in the Senate. But I'm hopeful that there will be Republicans in the House that will do the right thing. And I'm hopeful there'll be enough in the Senate that will look at this as a constitutional obligation and not a political exercise.
Well, I go back to the old Disney argument. It's what you do with what you got. And if all the Democrats can do is impeach him, they should do it. Josh, your thoughts? How far will Bill Taylor's brilliant testimony today? It was so dramatic. How far will this push the Democrats to get the impeachment articles before the floor?
I think this moves the ball quite a bit forward because it lays out in such explicit detail, backed up by notes from the time that this was happening. And it really draws such a direct line, as several lawmakers have said, where he's describing conversations with Ambassador to the EU, Sondland, who says, President Trump told me he wants this investigation, in a conversation about military aid and releasing it. There's no ambiguity here the way there has been up until this point.
If this is a criminal trial, there's so much testimony now to make the same point. There was a quid pro quo. But what I want to do is right now defend people like Bill Taylor against this president, because it's public servants like this guy. As Congressman, you pointed out, he comes out of West Point, public service from the time he's 18 years old, serving in the military, in the infantry, the 101, the 101st. Airborne, the whole thing, everything about his life is serving the country. And to have this president, who's given so little to the country, who's avoided service himself, to trash these people and call them deep staters is just playing a game of awful American nature. It's awful what this guy's doing about these. These are good people who are blowing the whistle on bad behavior, unconstitutional behavior. Thank you so much, Congressman Ted Lieu of California, former Senator Claire McCaskill of Missouri, or Missouri, depending where you are, and Josh Lederman.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me, or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.